Hey guys, it's Joe Perticone with the Bulwark, author of the Press Pass newsletter, which is our eyes and ears inside the Capitol. Today we're doing a video with Mallory Shelbourne, who is a reporter for USNI News and is also on the board of directors at Military Reporters and Editors, or MRE. And we're going to talk a little bit about what happened with the Pentagon basically demanding that reporters sign a pledge, and a lot of them ended up turning in their badges. And so, Mallory, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Joe.
So you've been a reporter at the Pentagon for years. And when you're not embedded with foreign militaries or flying over the South China Sea, you're in the Pentagon. And can you sort of walk us through how this came about? I guess since the inauguration, they've gotten more strict about press access in the Pentagon. The Hegseth tenure has really sought to impose a lot more restrictions on media. And so how did this begin and kind of bring us to where we are now?
Sure. So this all started back in January, February, right after the inauguration. They issued some guidance saying that they were going to move several outlets out of their workspaces in the Pentagon. Pentagon reporters have had badges and worked out of the building for decades. And the TV networks have booths in there with hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of equipment. They're able to do live shots in there. So several news outlets were told that they needed to rotate out of their spaces. They were not losing their badges, but they were losing their workspace. Now, for the print outlets, that's not as big of an issue because there is free desk space. For the TV networks, that is a very big deal because they lose the booths. So at first it was just 4 news outlets, and then our PPA leadership, which is the Pentagon Press Association, tried to negotiate and say, hey, we have space for everyone. And instead they doubled down and they moved 4 more news outlets out of their spaces. So that's how it started. And we have not had regular briefings coming out of the Pentagon like the State Department and the White House have. And then in May, they issued new guidance saying that restricting reporters' movement in the building. And this is a really important point because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about how reporters operate in the Pentagon. Reporters, I have had a badge for 7.5 years. I have always worn that badge around my neck on a lanyard, so it's visible. Reporters have only ever been able to access unclassified spaces. We have never been able to access classified spaces. But we are allowed to go up to talk to the spokespeople for the services. So I cover the sea services. I am able to go up to talk to the Navy, the Marine Corps. In May, they restricted us so that we could not do that anymore. And they said new guidance would be forthcoming. And then we received the latest guidance last month, an updated guidance earlier this month, and that brought us to where we are now.
So to kind of tell the viewers how things are different, in the Capitol where I work, you can walk anywhere and you have to wear a badge at all times, but you really can go anywhere you want. And if somebody tells you not to, like a police officer, that's when you have to stop, with the exception of very small spaces where they do their secure briefings, which are way underground and way out of the regular foot traffic. The White House, for example, they have their seating chart, but they kind of get shepherded from room to room and position to position. Mm-hmm. And the Pentagon, it seems like, has always been this area where like you can move freely, but within certain restrictions, because obviously you don't want to be walking into the Situation Room. But there's a real difference here it ranges based on the branch of government you're working in or the agency that you're working in. The movement matters because of the sensitivities that matter. In the Capitol, things are kind of, chosen at random, whether or not they're going to let reporters in. With the Pentagon, it's very specific. And so we have this clip from Congressman Bacon, who before serving in Congress was in the military and had worked inside the Pentagon. And he kind of pushed back in an interview on News Nation about this.
I'm not supportive of the new policy. When the Secretary of Defense says that the media had unfettered access to the Pentagon, it's not true. I was stationed there twice. I was a brigadier general at the Pentagon. Yes, they had access to the hallways, the cafeteria, but they did not have access to offices. They surely did have access to classified offices that were working with our secrets. But For them to get in any office, they have to be invited in. And so I think it was an overstatement saying they had this unfettered access. We're not Russia. We're not China. We're not North Korea. We don't want a bunch of Pravda newspapers in the United States. I cherish our freedom of the press, our freedom of the speech. And really, the media is a good counter check to the executive branch. It helps get the truth out. And I think that's very important. And
Right.
so I think this is an amateur hour. But their initial policy was way over the top, and they had to back up a little bit and come up with sort of a less egregious policy than what they first came out with.
Right.
But even then, I don't think it's necessary.
And so what do you make of what Don Bacon said there?
I think Congressman Bacon makes an important point. Reporters have never accessed classified spaces, and we have always been able to move around the building in a way that is professional and in accordance with, norms and rules in our press corps. And I think, for example, in the Capitol, you're able, scrums are a big thing. You're following lawmakers around. You're waiting to talk to them. You're waiting outside rooms for them to come out of meetings. That's not how reporting works inside the Pentagon, really. We all have desk space there. And as I said before, we're able to go upstairs to the offices of the spokespeople for the different services and talk to them there. Those are open, unclassified spaces. And also we have access to the OSD, Office of Secretary of Defense spaces with their spokespeople. So, when there's breaking news out of the Middle East, you're able to walk over to the desk of the public affairs officer in charge of U.S. Central Command and say, hey, what's happening here? Can I get a clarification? And, in the heat of breaking news, that's really important to get updated, accurate information in real time. But this idea that reporters are kind of roaming the hallways looking for generals and admirals to pull over on the side of the hallway, that's just not really how it works. I mean, absolutely, you run into people in the hallways and you talk to people and it's definitely a way that you meet people. But I think the activity of like scrumming and kind of running from office to office, that's not how it works inside the Pentagon.
Yeah. And so someone like Pete Hegseth, who I've seen a lot of people point out that, well, he was a member of the media. I think that as a host at Fox News, he was more of just a personality on TV. And so he hasn't taken with him some kind of like pledge for journalists in the way that you would think a traditional journalist would entering that role. And we've seen a bit of it in the Capitol. For example, they haven't restricted who can come in, but they've added new people to kind of pad with more friendly media. Mike Lindell, the MyPillow guy, his TV network now has a credential in the Capitol. And there are a bunch of others. And so we've seen clips where they're very hostile with members of Congress in ways, and decorum that isn't really on the standard with reporters. In terms of how it works in the Pentagon, there's now been this attempt to squeeze out the like fair and accurate reporting with this new pledge, which you've read in full and you understand. So if you could explain to the viewers what it required and why you guys didn't comply.
Sure. So just on the outlets that rotated in, that was part of when they rotated the initial outlets out earlier this year. They did rotate in different outlets. Most of them were more conservative outlets. But, the Pentagon press corps was very upfront about saying, we have space. We will make space for everyone. I think our press corps is a very welcoming bunch, and very professional. And that didn't really work, when they were negotiating the space, but, those outlets did, get desks. Most of them had not had spaces before in the Pentagon. As for the guidance itself, the guidance is really interesting because there's pieces of it that, it's an acknowledgement of the Pentagon's policies, yes, but there's concern, especially from legal experts that, signing this could potentially open you up to legal action. One of the things you have to acknowledge is that, by possessing and or publishing both not just classified material, but just unclassified material that's sensitive, and not ready or government authorized to be released, just reporting on that unclassified information, could cause harm. And my understanding from legal experts is that acknowledging that it could cause harm is the key here, because that could be really dangerous for reporters. It also seeks to criminalize solicitation of information. So it mentions posting social media posts seeking tips, which, as you and I both know, is very standard practice for reporters to say, hey, if you have tips, reach out to me, in a secure fashion, of course. So, this is really just basic functions of reporting, that the guidance is seeking to, frankly, criminalize and prevent us from being able to do in the building.
That's another real difference with the Capitol is like, if a member of Congress tells you something, it's like they've declassified it, even if it maybe was classified at one point. And they love leaking. They love to squeal. That's not the case with admirals and generals. And so it's very, I think you have a beat that requires a lot more being more delicate. And it seems that that's kind of, they've ignored that component of it. And by not signing, you're, like you said, opening yourself up to potential legal ramifications. Like, that's a huge deal, because as we've seen, whether it's random websites like Gawker or bigger websites that are, taking flack from the government, it's a really big deal if they can be gone after legally, and it can even result in the end of the publication. And that's why, so many newsrooms have lawyers on retainer. When you guys came to the deadline yesterday when you guys came to the deadline on Wednesday, and it was either turn in your badges or sign the pledge, what happened?
We all turned in our badges and we walked out together at 4:00, and that was it. We all handed in the badges to the office where we needed to, and they had some folks who escorted us to the river entrance of the building, just because there's a section of hallway we had to walk through without a badge anymore. So they walked us to that exit point, and we walked out.
And I saw that One American News had signed the pledge. I saw, for example, the Daily Caller said they're not going to sign it. And so it's not just, the left-wing media won't sign this thing. It's literally a bunch of conservative outlets said, this is BS. We don't want to sign this thing. It's not fair. And, good for them. But when you were turning in your badges and walking out, how did that go down? Was it very calm?
Yes, very calm. I'd say there was probably like between 30 and, it's hard to approximate numbers, between 30 and 50 reporters who walked out together. And yeah, it was mostly us walking in like kind of a single file line in a group out the building. And no, it was very calm, very normal. I mean, there were some folks who, for schedule purposes, had to hand their badges in earlier in the day. But we walked out together, and we walked over the long corridor by the river entrance to the press parking lot.
You guys did this walkout and left and turned in your badges. And as you said, it was very chill, despite not being a very chill reason for it. But Stephen Chung, who's been with Trump since the beginning, he either in a political or official capacity, he's now in the administration. He posted on X or Twitter, source. A few reporters on this wall have privately said that they were bullied into participating in the walkout when they actually wanted to stay. They were physically confronted and threatened with retaliation if they didn't join the protest. First of all, I found it a little ironic that an administration official would cite an anonymous source. You don't have to talk about that. But the fact that he is saying all this stuff that happened without providing evidence, I mean, were any people threatened, to your knowledge?
To my knowledge, absolutely not. I was in the building for most of the day. I got there around 11:30 and I left just after 4 with everyone else. I saw nothing like that. I think what's really great about our press corps is that it's a really welcoming place, and, everyone's extremely professional. Also, many of my colleagues have been covering the Pentagon for decades. I have 7.5 years of experience on the beat, and I feel very green still. And I would say I'm a junior reporter in the scheme of the entire press corps. And I think that, I think the Pentagon press corps is made up of a great group of reporters, and I've never seen anyone get bullied in the Pentagon press corps. So as far as I know, I did not see anything like that happen.
In terms of really the way this all happened, do you think there's a resolution, or do you think this is going to stick around forever? I mean, what are your hopes, and what's going to happen? Like, how does your beat change now? If
there's one thing I've learned, reporting in Washington for the last decade, as I'm sure you have, is that you really can't predict the future. So, I don't know what's going to happen. I do know that, I am operating under the assumption that we won't be back in the building anytime soon, and it will be harder, and our jobs will be different, but, we'll continue reporting on the military. Lucky for me and for my colleagues, we've been on the beat for a long time. So we have sources, both inside and outside the building. So, we'll be taking meetings in different places, and we'll be doing things it will be different, but, some more like outside the building kind of work, but that's just the name of the game. And, other reporters who cover agencies have to do that, and we're going to adjust.
Thank you for joining me, Mallory. You can check her out at USNI News, and you can subscribe down here at the Bulwark. Watch us on YouTube, get Bulwark Takes podcasts. And for my newsletter, you can sign up at presspass.thebulwark.com.